Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. My name is Bork. In today's video, we'll be covering mistakes to avoid for World Flipper. Not to mention, this video is sponsored by BlueStacks. We'll talk about why it's the best Android emulator really quick. But let's go ahead and jump into our first mistake to avoid, and that's going to be never summoning on the armament banner. All right, this is going to be the weapon banner. Really quick, the reason why is if you jump into boss battles right here, you are able to get weapons from this area. Not to mention, you can go to item exchange and you can get really great weapons right here, some of the best weapons in the game. Not this one in particular, but it's just something to take into account in case you're like, oh, aren't these weapons like super good? You can get like the best ones. You'll be able to farm them in future boss battles and future events. That way you can actually get gear for free and not use your premium currency, because your premium currency ideally should be used for summons or fesses, because a lot of the characters that you want will be locked behind gacha. And the next thing is be very frugal with how you raise your characters. So for example, if you jump back right here again, you can see there's the mana board and then there's raise levels. These resources like the mana is very difficult to get. All right, so the only way to obtain these is via jumping in the story or farming in the labyrinths. You can also sort by rarity, I recommend it, or you can essentially filter by whether you have 4 stars or 5 stars, whichever. This is the way I like to do it. That way I can get my characters all grouped up in a nice way. But if I click Kelty right here, you can see we're using like the blue gem or the blue mana. This could also be seen as Eldwater from Dragalia Lost. So if you hit level up right here, you can see we're using it up. So it's a very finite resource, very difficult to get, not something that you really want to mess around with, because if you watch the progression of which characters that you upgrade, you're essentially holding yourself back from progressing within story or progressing within events or progressing within boss battles, because you can only unlock this stuff so long as your units are strong enough to tackle. All right, so the next things is you can see all of my units, they're sort of like leveled in the same playing field. Kelty is a little bit higher because she deals the most DPS, and not to mention she's going to be sitting in the front. Your frontmost unit is actually going to be taking the most damage, more than likely. Not to mention, you can have multiple parties. I'm running wind. You can run a mono wind element team and progress through the game perfectly fine. But let's go ahead and talk about why you run mono element. So if you look at Kelty right here and you look at her leader abilities, she's going to be providing a whopping 70% attack buff to wind units specifically for her leader ability. 40% right here, 30% right here. Not to mention, she's going to be providing buffs to herself as well, but that doesn't really affect the party, right? So let's go ahead and jump back and look at someone like Furia. Furia, if you look at her abilities, she's actually going to be increasing wind HP buff, and not to mention 15% attack buff for wind units as well. Just note that her leader ability does not apply since she's not going to be sitting in the leader section right here. But just note that there are going to be characters like Arisa who does not provide a wind bonus to anyone with her abilities just yet. Just note that all of these are going to be self, but she is going to be providing a 4% party buff to everyone. Eventually can be max of 40%, but why do that when you have someone like Kelty who's just gonna increase your attacks by 70% right out the gate? So this is why you don't run like, non-wind elemental characters. So if you didn't catch it, look at Arisa's attack really quick. It's going to be 225. If you look at someone like Rizelt right here who has 123 attack, that's definitely really low, and he's a highly recommended character. And if you look at Heartleaf right here, she has 152. She's a 3-star character and she already has more attack, not to mention she's a support. So it's just something to look into in case you're like, should I really run a mono element team? Yeah, everyone sort of benefits from it, and not to mention some units will provide abilities that will further increase other wind element users. And this sort of rolls around to our next tip when it comes to teams. Quick credits to Pecan for putting this all together. He's the one who's actually guiding me on what teams to build. So for example, you can run Veron on a fire team. All right, if you didn't know, Veron is actually going to be a dark unit. You scroll up, this is him right here. This is an Underlight guide, so thank you to Underlight for providing that information. But just note that you can run whatever you want in the sub slots, but ideally in the main slots you run particular mono element units. That way everyone gets a benefit towards the team. Another character that you should also look into is Shasusu, I think that's her name. Maybe it's different, I haven't pulled her yet, but essentially she's going to be a very great unit that can go on any team in particular. Just note she's on the light team, she's on like the green teams, the wind teams, she's on the lightning teams. She's essentially on most teams because she is such a high performer. It's really interesting though, I don't see her on the fire and water teams, but I'm pretty sure there's an explanation for that. And what's really cool is also to see Veron. He's a very universal unit because he's going to be of the dark type. That's something to look into. Just note that Kelty is going to be mostly performing in wind teams. All right, if you go right here into home, you can actually click certain things and interact with the world. So make sure to look around. Sometimes there's like hidden features where you can get like free jewels or get some free characters. Go ahead and jump into some some gameplay while we talk about today's sponsor, BlueStacks. So BlueStacks is designed for blazing fast speed and high octane action. It packs a punch with faster performance than any other high-end Android device or Android platform. With faster boot, install, and launch times, core gamers can now look forward to amazing gameplay experiences for performance-hungry RPGs, strategy, tactical RPGs, and other games on your Android devices. With vastly upgraded multi-instance managers and eco mode, gamers can run more game instances faster and with the least lag. Add to that significantly more refined game controls and interface improvements, allowing everyone to enjoy seamless gaming experiences unlike any other. Not to mention, BlueStacks is going to be using 2 gigs less of RAM for multiple instances that you're running, and they also added this feature known as the eco mode. You can see right here, use less resources as you are, doing multiple rerolls. And not to mention, you can also clone instances. Also, you have this feature, trim memory, where you can see I cleared up like 83 megs of memory right there. Really nice feature. And you can also do sync operations where you can control multiple devices at once. BlueStacks has been my go-to Android emulator ever since they upgraded to BlueStacks 5. Just been easier to reroll, control multiple instances. Not to mention, I just like the features that they keep adding on to it as they progress with the upgrades of BlueStacks. I'm hoping in the future they'll add like an automatic reroll button. We were talking about that earlier in the Discord. Let's go ahead and jump into some other mistakes to avoid. And thank you for sponsoring today's video, BlueStacks. So if you hit next right here, the biggest things that I want to talk about if you go into units is you want to be careful with how you upgrade your mana board. All right, so we're going to click Kelty right here. This is going to be her mana board. Look at what the stuff that I'm upgrading. Also, if you see this blinking, it's just giving you a tutorial on like how stuff works. Don't worry about it. It's nothing crazy. You can see that there's a bunch of smaller statues. They're essentially glowing. If they're glowing, that means you can unlock it and pretty much participate in it. Now, the things that I want us to focus on is don't look at these like tiny little statues that will give you more attack bonuses. You want to look at these giant statues right here that will actually change your character's capabilities. So for example, this one right here will give Kelty more set self-direct hits to 2, not to mention increase her total damage. This isn't unlocked until level 40. If you need short-term games, you can definitely upgrade these statues, but it's just something to look into in case you're like, oh, is this really worth it to get? It's only going to give you 3% attack buff, and it's going to cost you 5 of these crystals, and you can essentially jump over here and get larger benefits in the future. It's just better to sort of set yourself up for success, and not to mention get these because these are going to be free jewels that you can get from the board. So we talked about a couple of things already. Let's go ahead and jump into the shop really quick. Some of you might be wondering what this trove is right here. I don't recommend anyone buying any of this stuff at the very beginning of the game because you can essentially get this all if you jump into home right here, over into events and in the labyrinth section. You can see like this little wind crystal that we were looking at earlier. You can click the eye, you can see what like drops and stuff. If you go back to the shop, you will actually see that they're going to be selling some of these things over here in the trove, like this gust element. So that is why I don't recommend folks to buy anything here, because essentially you can participate and get it from like the actual labyrinth. All right, here's that gust element that we were looking at earlier. Just note, in case you want to maximize your stamina early on, you can balance it between jumping into quest mode right here and then jumping into events. Just note that it only applies to like rank 10 and below. Once you hit like rank 10 and up, you're going to be using as much stamina as you need to progress through the story and also rank up at the same time. So it's up to you how you want to min-max your stamina later on. So we've covered a lot of things. Let's go ahead and circle with all of it. Biggest thing, do not use like your premium currency on the weapon banners right here. It's an absolute scam. When it comes to your units, be very frugal with what you upgrade on raising levels. Not to mention, be careful with how you set up your team, because you can have units like Kelty who's providing 70% attack buffs, and then you have someone like Rizelt who's a fantastic unit. We've covered it before, but the thing is, Rizelt will not get like that attack bonus that everyone else is getting. You can see he only has a 123 attack and he's a warrior, but if you look at someone like my healer right here, she's actually going to be getting more attack. She's a support and she's a 3-star. This is something to look into, but just note that their abilities are going to be why you use them in the sub-slot section in the first place, right? And that's why you can use whatever sub-slot character. Even though like Veron is not a wind unit, he's still going to be fantastic because he is going to be giving you the ability to do some penetration, and you can access the mana board right here and just clicking on the characters that you like. And like we talked about earlier, just focus on the bigger statues and try to essentially plan your upgrades so you can get to the bigger statues as quickly as possible, because these are going to be providing like the bigger upgrades. Don't worry about like the ones off to the side side just yet, because essentially it's going to be wasting some of your resources in order to get into the bigger stuff. And then the next thing is not buying anything in the trove, because essentially most of this is a scam unless you desperately need it for some weird reason. But honestly, I don't think you do, because you can probably farm it within events right here, because you can get most of like the elemental stuff. But just know it can be a little bit hard as you're progressing through the game, because you know the drop rates can be iffy. But your biggest things for end game will probably be in boss battles right here, and then of course getting like the different weapons as you go through the game. And then the last thing that I want to cover is quest. All right, the reason why I left this for last is because I know some people already know it. Go through the quest and just spam this, because this is going to be giving you some of the best gear in the game. If you look over my Kelty right here, she's not wearing it, but if you look at Feria, she's actually wearing this little orb. We went through chapter 1, and this orb is going to be giving us 10% HP buff to the entire party, so that's really nice. And then there's going to be other orbs that we can get in the future. This one from chapter 3, I think, where this is going to be giving a multi-ball effect, and not to mention attack buff. So make sure to jump into story, because this is going to be one of your biggest forms of gear at the early starts of the game. But yeah, now you know how to essentially set yourself up, save your premium currency, and all this stuff. Hopefully this video helps you out, and also a huge thanks again to BlueStacks for sponsoring today's video. Anyways, if you made it this far, consider subscribing, dropping a like, leaving a comment. Follow me on Twitch, follow me on Twitter. Once we hit 27,500 subs, you're doing a giveaway. You can look at this progression map. Just note you don't have to exactly follow it. Thanks so much for watching. Have yourself a fantastic day, and I will see you in the next one.